So then why Fuji? What is it about Fujifilm that made me switch back to a system that I had already previously owned? A system that I had left out of frustration after having 3 bodies fail on me in a span of just a few months. What is it? Is there some magic? This is what I'm going to talk to you about today, while I'm having some Beretta Brewing Company additional info. Supposed to be a heavily hopped IPA with Citra, Enigma, Eclipse, and Sabro as far as hops varieties go. Very, very misty, very hazy, very pale, and really very good. Slightly bitter, very slightly citrusy. Sup boys, welcome to 1,000 Words. My name is Radu, I'm a street photographer from Romania, and today I want to talk to you about why I decided to go to Fuji again. Now, I did touch upon this subject in quite some detail in previous videos, but today I want to explain a rather bold claim I made recently when I said this is the perfect camera. And sure enough, I must add to it, it's the perfect camera for me, but I do want to talk to you about why that is the case. Because once it became apparent I was going to switch away from Sony, first, the logical progression was to consider my available options in the full frame space. But that was quickly resolved when I thought about Canon and their really boring looking bodies and their utterly lackluster lens ecosystem. Then there was these Panasonics, which with their very decided video focus seemed like a waste for me. That only left Nikon. And while the ZF did wink at me quite alluringly, it wasn't an option for me on the one hand because of the large size, the big heft, quite a heavy camera if we're being honest, and the flip-out screen also didn't make matters any better because I really dislike that kind of screen. I'm a very stills-oriented person, so that's something that is only a hindrance in my book, more so than is of any help. So that basically left me with no options in the full frame space. On the opposite end of the spectrum, I had quite seriously considered going to Micro Four Thirds, because on the one hand I was enamored with the experience I had with the Pen F, and the OM5 was a camera that seemed to mark a lot of boxes for me, because it seemed like I was always after that unicorn of a camera, that camera that allowed me to have it all. And for the longest time, I wasn't even sure that was possible. Hold that thought, actually hold that thought. I want to finish my idea and tell you why I didn't end up sticking with Micro Four Thirds. Thanks to Paul, hello Paul, I was able to thoroughly test the Pen F, and together with it I was able to make a pretty good impression of the Micro Four Thirds system. While great in hand, fantastic as far as shooting experience, the images do tend to end up looking very flat, harsh, rather too digital, so that kind of disqualified it from my list. So then, the extremes were gone. That left me with a choice in the middle, and this is the moral of the story. The X-T3 is in the perfect middle, although in some regards is much closer to full frame. While sensor size-wise, it's smack dab in the middle between Micro Four Thirds sensor and the full frame sensor with a 1.5 crop. as far as resulting images go, this is much more like an actual full-frame camera without actually being. While options exist, other options exist in the aps-c ecosystem, none are actually worthwhile as far as I'm concerned, because Fuji seems to completely dominate the aps-c landscape. They have really invested in their aps-c cameras, seeing how basically they only have this, arguably their main system. So their competitors simply pale in comparison. Yeah, there's Sony, their A6 XXX A6000 lineup, which is rather okay, but still I find Sony cameras to be very, very sterile, soulless computers that happen to make images, is what I like to call them. There's also a Nikon or two, but that's not even worth mentioning. What else? There's Canons, again not worth mentioning. Is there anything else? And going back to full frame, before you ask why not Leica, it's because I could never realistically afford a Leica, and even if I could, with quite substantial effort, because let's say I can put money aside and eventually buy a Leica, it's nothing I can justify, because it's silly to me. It's really silly spending that much money on a camera. Thousands and thousands and thousands. Where was I? So yeah, the aps-c landscape basically screams Fuji. Let's be honest, there's no competition. Fuji is king as far as aps-c size sensors go. So then, the camera that allows me to have it all. I wanted a camera that's still technologically able while having soul and character, not being sterile like Sony's are. I wanted a camera that's hefty enough to provide a substantial feel of something worthwhile in your hand while still being compact, easy to carry. I wanted a camera that's with the times as far as technology, however, without features I don't use, like AI this, AI that, video this, video that. I want a stills camera. Furthermore, I wanted a camera that's cheap while being good. I wanted a camera that's somewhat recent while still being affordable. I wanted a camera that has great look and feel, great handling without being a chunky boy, without being cumbersome, big and heavy. I wanted a good lens ecosystem with proper options, not like Canon, not like actually even Sony, because their aps-c lens lineup seems to have been all but abandoned. Sure, there are Sigmas, there are Viltroxes, there are third-party manufacturers, but it's really impressive the amount of lenses available for the Fuji X mount. There's their very affordable X-C lineup, the plastic fantastics, which are fantastic because they share the same optical construction as the slightly more expensive XF lenses. There's their native primes, the fast primes I mean, recent ones at that. There's also their high-end primes and zooms available. But if we're talking about third-party lenses, this is where things get really, really interesting, because on the used market I've seen lenses go for as little as $50. And sure enough, they're Chinese manual lenses, but nothing to sneeze at. I'm sure they can make wonderful images. They even have lenses like 50 millimeters, I think it's 35 f/0.95, and they're not even $200. I think there's really a crazy amount of cheap, very good available lenses on the Fuji X mount. There's Viltrox, which make really great lenses for the Fuji X mount. There's TT Artisans, there's 7 Artisans. Recently I bought the Sirui, the 56mm f1.2, which the exposure is getting a bit wacko right now. Let me lower the ISO. So yeah, the Siri 56mm f1.2 seems to be a dream lens as far as I'm concerned. It looks like a vintage lens, but functions like an autofocus lens, and the modern one at that. It's basically great. And most importantly, I wanted a camera that makes great images with great image quality, with great dynamic range, with great low light performance, while still being able to maintain a look that's somewhat gentle, somewhat soft even at times. I'm not a fan of overly sharp, very digital, very clinical and clean looking images, which is one of the main reasons why I even gave up shooting native Sony glass on the A7R III. So then why the X-T3? Frankly, because I think it's the last great camera Fuji made. Bold claim, I know, but hear me out. While the X-T2 is the last Japanese-made camera, this is still extremely well made. Now, I haven't tried the X-T4 or the X-T5, but from what I understand, they're not nearly as well built as this is, and this is extremely well built. Just a hair, a smidge less so than the X-T2, but still extremely well put together. It feels like a solid, dense, well thought out, very good piece of technical engineering. It feels great in the hand, it feels dense, it feels great, it really feels like it can take a beating. So that basically covers the why the XT, why not the X Pro? Because while it did seem like an option for some time, there are some things about the X Pro lineup that kind of rubbed me the wrong way. Ah, Jesus, this is great beer. Now, first up, there's the viewfinder. I'm one that really appreciates a good, high-resolution, large electronic viewfinder. I have tried some, sparingly, admittedly, I have tried some optical viewfinders, and I find them all right, but that's neither here nor there. I am a bit partial to the rangefinder aesthetic, but that's not enough of a reason to sway me over to the X Pro side. It also feels like it's not well balanced like the X-T3, which is extremely well thought out. I think it's fantastic. And the X Pro 2 is slightly long in the tooth, while the X Pro 3 has that notorious issue with the tiny LCD that stops working, so I didn't feel like taking chances. Also, the button placement makes much more sense to me on the X-T3 than it does on the X Pro. Furthermore, I find the X-T3 to be excellent value for money. Fantastic. Now, I paid for this here setup, the X-T3 and the 23F2. I paid something like 860 euros, give or take. Let's call it 850, rounded down to a nice even number. And I think that's excellent value for money. It was basically brand new. Everything, all the dials turn crisply, even the lens. Everything seems to have had very little use. There's practically no wear on the body. It looks like it has only been used indoors. For that amount of money, there's really no other system besides Fujifilm that can offer as much technology. On the one hand. Now, as far as the experience goes, there's really no competition. Nothing even comes close to the ergonomics, the handling, the look and feel. And while it may seem, I'll give you, somewhat superficial, this is something that's really very important to me. And having spent the last couple of weeks with this camera, because it's not long since I bought it, I'm really happy to have bought this. And basically that's the gist of it. The camera that allows me to have it all. Looks, character, incredible image quality. And I've been very, very surprised with how well this handles high dynamic range. scenes. That's why I said this shoots much more like a full-frame camera does than I would have expected it to. At the end of the day, Fujifilm for me is the Goldilocks zone, the perfect compromise, the camera that allows me to have it all. Yet another video where I gush about how cool Fujifilm is. It's the single camera system that made me feel this way. That about wraps it all up. Thank you for watching. I have been Radu. This has been 1,000 Words. Please go visit my website, 1kwords.net, buy a print or 3, read my blog. Until next time, I bid you farewell.